I accidentally ended up at a tarot card reader's table, and she looked behind me and said, "Who's that 16-year-old girl standing behind you?"
There's a long, long ritual which explains it must have been terrifying for the client. If they heard something, you'd die of terror.
Welcome to How To. I'm Mike Pesca. So a confession, I don't believe in ghosts, but a counter confession, I think I might be wrong. Let us consider the evidence.
Respectable people of a respectable age, educated, intelligent, articulate, told me of their experiences. And it was impossible, even on that sampling, for me to say it's all nonsense. It's hardwired into our minds. And people who say it's nonsense and don't believe it, well, that's their affair.
If you read those as you have, if you read those ancient texts, is the tone about dealing with ghosts or understanding ghosts no different from a practical day-to-day matter? How to plant a seed, how to navigate the seas?
It's a bit different because, on the whole, the understanding was when someone was buried and they were laid to rest, very effectively, they're supposed to be down there and stay there. And if they came back, there was always a reason. And sometimes the intercourse between, as it were, human beings and ghosts is very sympathetic because they feel they're in a miserable position. They're driven out, they have to come back. There's unsettled business. For example, there's a long list of ghosts of the dead who are likely, plausible, to cause trouble by coming back. And a lot of them are to do with a violent end, women who die in childbirth, or people who die on a battlefield, they fall down a well and drown, all those sorts of people. Sometimes when the body isn't actually there to bury, for example, they are the sort, if there's going to be any trouble, it will be them. Now, to just pick up your other point, that ghosts in Mesopotamia did not wear Victorian clothing.
No.
So we cannot posit that that was what all ghosts always wore. But what is interesting is that the exorcists, the specialists, they have a whole series of questions to level to someone who has seen a ghost. They get called in like a consultant, and they go through the descriptions in order to try and identify who the ghost is. Because if you know who it is, it's easier to deal with. And in fact, it's clear that they divided ghosts seen by people as either people they knew jolly well, they knew who they were, or they didn't know who they were, and their ritual and their activity would be affected by that fact.
Was the presence of a ghost necessarily an indication that something had gone wrong? Well, you mentioned someone who died in childhood or improperly buried. And I think even with the Victorian ghosts, they're haunting the present because, well, maybe I'm thinking of Thornton Wilder's Our Town, and they haunted the present because they were not yet weaned from the living, but also had unfinished business or perhaps wisdom to give to others. So long question, but was that same conception at play in ancient Mesopotamia?
They didn't have clanking chains, and they didn't have wisdom to impart, normally speaking. They were unhappy and restless and sometimes malevolent, and they had to be dealt with. And the analogy that I always think about is like this. If you're making salad in the kitchen and a mouse runs across the floor, you jump up in the air because it frightens or shocks you. But then, you have to deal with it. You have to get somebody in. They have to do this. They have to do that. You've got to pay for it. And it's a bit like that. And it didn't mean that seeing a ghost was necessarily the end of you. However, if the ghosts talked, that was regarded as really rather dangerous. And if the exorcist discovered that, then they would have a battery of spells or various things in order to undo the danger of hearing a ghost's voice.
Yeah. And also, I've been reading your books and watching your lectures. Some of these spells, there was some legalese at the end. Whereas if you read a contract, it will say, an all future business, heretofore undecided, just a general clause that captured anything that they hadn't met before.
Well, that is true, because those lists that you mentioned, they're to us rather amusing, but they were very serious because the exorcist also had to get rid of demons and evil forces.
Now, demons are different from ghosts.
They're different, but they did both. But the lists in both cases are like this. It's that same principle that you get in modern contracts, that they do all the names they can think of, and then they round it up as if to say things we haven't yet thought of, but which will be invented. And the reason we know that is this. In one of the lists of the evil things to get rid of, there's one called any evil. So It's like this, whether it's this one or this one or this one or any other evil. And in Babylonia, with their unique intellectual approach to this, any other evil became a demon in himself. So you can have a ritual to drive out, and there's a drawing on the tablet of what any other evil looks like. That's quite a difficult thing to do, as you can imagine. So they had a kind of literal sense, and the contractual basis is also not an imaginary thing, because when your father dies, the oldest son is given the responsibility of making regular offerings of food and drink to the ghost. They knew that they were skeletons and they knew what they didn't eat with throats, but they still had to do this thing like all the other belief systems. Yeah. So this is what happened. If the son was too busy or he couldn't be bothered or he forgot all about it, after a while, the relative down there would start getting a bit tetchy and a bit irritable. And eventually they would have to go back up there and ask, where are my supplies? And this is the contract, and the ghosts are given words to say they're aggrieved because where's my due, that sort of thing. Oh. And they decided that was a good theatre in which to posit this funny intercourse.